Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to an all-new edition of War Week Radio. Guys, thank you for joining us, for the War Week Radio afternoon chats. Guys, we have a lot of things to discuss. And obviously, this is the Monday afternoon following, Mayweather versus Logan Paul, which took place last night in Miami, Florida at the Hard Rock Stadium, home of the Miami Dolphins, right? And guys, before we continue, we do have to remind everyone that this show is always brought to you by thefightsaga.com. Guys, for all the latest boxing news, please go visit fightsaga.com on the daily, right? I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. I was originally going to be, with my brother Brian Dantzler, a heavyweight fighter, but I guess he's not going to be able to make it, so we're just going to have to do this by our lonesome this afternoon, which I have no problem doing that. As many of you know that frequent the program, I don't have any, I'm never at a shortage of things to say. So, guys, we're going to be talking, our topics du jour are going to be the Mayweather Logan Paul aftermath, our thoughts on the fight, our thoughts on the event, as well as the post-fight commentary and the fallout. We're also going to touch on, after that, we're going to touch on Paulie, the Magic Man, his recent comments to the Schmo on Fury versus Wilder 3. We're also going to touch on Errol Spence's critical commentary on Bob Arum and Terrence Crawford, as well as his chances for a big, predicted KO knockout over Manny Pacquiao coming on August 21st. So, guys, let's start at the top, reading the headlines. On Sunday night, June 7th, at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Florida, former 5-division world champion Floyd Mayweather Jr. participated in an 8-round exhibition against YouTube personality and part-time boxer Logan Paul. In a stadium that customarily holds around 65,000 fans, they filled about 30,000 of them. For an event of this nature, that is excellent. And in the entire week leading up to the event, Floyd Mayweather was characterizing his opponent as, hey, this is nothing but easy work. You know, I don't have to use my A game, my C, my B game, or C game. I could use my Z game, and the outcome will be exactly the same. End quote. Unfortunately, the 44-year-old all-time great was unable to stop the much larger, physically bigger 26-year-old ring novice. And so it was scheduled for 8 rounds, an exhibition with no judges, no decision. Knockouts were allowed, but to the dismay of Floyd Mayweather and his fans, Logan Paul went the distance. And according to his brother, Jake Paul, who's a little bit biased, he believes that, his brother Logan Paul deserved to win the event. And in the minds of a lot of fans, they see Logan Paul just going to hear the final, making it to the final bell, meant a big victory for the Paul brothers. And Floyd, post-fight, seemed a bit embarrassed about the entire thing. And at the post-fight press conference, he offered several reasonable explanations as to why he couldn't KO the 6'2" heavyweight fighter. He had this to say post-fight. He said, Logan Paul can grapple. He's good at holding. He's very good at holding. His whole goal was to survive, and that was a win for him. If he could land a few punches, then punch and hold, then that was a win for them. So if they're happy, then so be it. I think if he tried to fight a lot more, then it probably wouldn't have gone to 8 rounds. When the money comes in, we'll see who's the real winner, because at the end of the day, I'm going into the Hall of Fame for boxing. I have nothing to prove. If they're happy with holding and grappling for 8 rounds, well, then congratulations, end quote. You know what's funny? When I think of Floyd, I mean, guys, you have to see the irony of this. And keep in mind, guys, although I've been very critical of Floyd's commentary out of the ring, as well as his, activity outside of the ring, his controversial, bouts with domestic violence, and some of the things he stated about several promoters and fighters, as well as the business of boxing and his, influence on American fighters that have had a lingering effect, all negatively, towards the sport of boxing. Although I've been very critical on his activity in the past, make no mistake about this, guys, I've always had a lot of respect for Floyd Mayweather Jr. In fact, he was always one of my favorite fighters to watch in the ring. As Pretty Boy Floyd, boy, he was something else. The speed that killed. He not only beat the best fighters at 130 and 135 pounds, he dominated them, with the exception of the first fight with Jose Luis Castillo. But he was something to behold in the ring. And even when he moved up to 147 pounds, he was still dominant and still the best defensive fighter I will probably ever see in my lifetime. But guys, you have to see the irony of this. Floyd Mayweather complaining about someone holding excessively in the ring. Because think about what he said, right? I think, and once again, I'm quoting Floyd Mayweather here, I think if he tried to fight a lot more, then it probably wouldn't have gone 8 rounds, end quote. Guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but this sounds a lot like Marcos Maidana's excuses post-fight circa 2014 when asked by the press why he couldn't KO Mayweather in 2 meetings. Mayweather and his band of cult followers complaining about grappling and holding excessively. Well, you've got to love it. So, guys, I tell you what, let's move forward, though. And once again, I understand, and hopefully, Floyd Mayweather finally understands why so many mainstream and casual fans were complaining about excessive holding in the ring. Because once again, guys, this is a terrible trend that referees allow in the ring, right? Keep in mind, clinching and holding is only used, right? I don't care how much fans will try to defend this kind of behavior in the ring. Clinching, holding is against the rules. It's not a part of boxing. Oh, well, clinching's just smart fighting. No, it's not. Clinching and holding is always used to make up for deficiencies that a fighter has on the inside. Make no mistake about it. So it's always been defined. And it's terrible for boxing. Look, mainstream and casual fans want to see more fight in their fight. They don't like to see a lot of excessive holding. Breaks the flow of action. It makes for real stinkers on TV. Right? But on this evening, last night, the only time Floyd was defensive all night was not in the ring, but at the post-fight press conference. So he felt a little embarrassed. So how does Floyd usually handle his embarrassment? Well, he goes on the defensive, starts attacking. And he had this to say. Guys, here's the real cringeworthy stuff. If you hadn't seen it, go check out his entire post-fight press conference. This is what he had to say. Quote, I'm able to come out at my age, 44, and still sell out 30,000 and still do crazy numbers to where I can make Showtime crash. If you guys weren't aware of it, end quote, if you guys weren't aware of it, The Showtime streaming service actually crashed because so many people wanted to go in at the same time, log in, and download the fight, purchase the fight. Well, now they're actually offering certain members refunds because they weren't able to see the entire broadcast, right? So we're going to pick up right where we left off in the post-fight press conference. And quote, just leading up to the fight, my trunks alone were worth millions. With the patches on my trunks, that's worth 30 million alone. So who's really the smartest one in the sport of boxing? If you guys don't want to see me do no exhibitions, don't watch. I'll come on record and tell y'all, when it comes to legalized bank robbing, I'm the best, end quote. Okay, guys, that's where every fight fan should have a problem. And this is where Floyd Mayweather fans are completely getting the wrong idea. It's funny how whenever you have a valid criticism of Floyd's behavior or his words or his actions, even if it's a valid statement that you bring up, it's always, oh man, you're just hating on Floyd. No. Guys, think about what he just said. If you guys don't want to see any more exhibitions, then don't watch. No problem with that statement. I'll come on record and tell y'all, when it comes to legalized bank robbing, I'm the best. Floyd is virtually admitting. Okay, now let's look at Merriam-Webster. What is the informal definition of robbing? It's to steal or overcharge someone for something. He's virtually admitting that he's ripping customers off. He's ripping fans off with a subpar product and basically shoving it in your face, saying, if you don't want to see it, don't purchase it. That's the problem I have, guys. I mean, look, I can understand why Floyd is embarrassed that he couldn't knock out a YouTuber, right? I'm completely there. I completely understand that. I would be embarrassed too if I were him. You're the greatest defensive fighter of our generation, one of the greatest of all time. And you couldn't knock out a novice. Now, to his defense, the guy weighed over 200 pounds the day of the fight and is 6'2". But the way he was bragging leading up to the fight, said he didn't even have to hardly train, that he could knock him out on his worst day. And considering that this guy is in fact a novice who already has one official loss to another YouTuber, no, it's not a very good look. I can understand all of that. I can understand why he's embarrassed. But think about this, guys, if this were another sport. Could you imagine LeBron James, after getting knocked out of the NBA playoffs to the Suns, could you imagine him on the podium, okay, talking about how many millions he made in both earnings as well as sponsorship money, right? Could you imagine him bragging, saying, you know what? Oh, well, we lost. Oh, well, that's life. But you know what? I still made over $30 million a year this year. Man, and, you know, totaling with my sponsorship, I made over $60, $70 million this year. How do you think fans or even the league would respond to that? Right? I mean, when you think about it, LeBron James was heavily ridiculed for merely using the post-game NBA platform, the post-fight press conference or game press conference, to plug his new movie, Space Jam. He was ridiculed for that. Could you imagine him talking like Floyd Mayweather did post-fight? Saying, you know what? I'm the very best at legalized bank robbery. It's a terrible look for the sport, guys. I don't care if he's retired or not. He's still one of the premier ambassadors for boxing, basically admitting to the fans that he ripped them off. Could you imagine? Could you imagine Patrick Mahomes bragging about his annual salary of $21 million during the post-game press conference at the Super Bowl after getting blown out by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Could you imagine the media and fan reaction if Patrick Mahomes said that after getting his ass whooped by the Bucs in the Super Bowl. Look, guys, here's the truth, and this is why so many people take such great exception to what Floyd Mayweather had to say post-fight, because fans will never hear another ambassador for any other sport or league talk about ripping fans off or participating in a legalized bank robbery at the fans' expense. Never. And you know what, Floyd Mayweather, please, brother, stay retired, because that's a terrible look for boxing. Terrible for the sport. Jeez, man. And guys, it didn't end there at the post-fight press conference. He said, well, this one was just as cringeworthy. He said, and for some reason, I don't know why this guy always has to have Manny Pacquiao in his mind and in his mouth when it comes to something that he does. So once again, being embarrassed on the defensive, he had this to say about the Pac-Man. Quote, when I come and do an exhibition or come out of retirement and have some fun, I do it because I want to, not because I have to do it. Whereas Pacquiao, at his age, which is sad, he still has to fight. End quote. Floyd, brother, are you jealous of the Pac-Man? Do you hate the guy? Dude, you already beat him in the ring. Are you upset, man, because his fans love him? People all around the world respect him and love him? What's going on? You don't have enough fans? Your fans love you too, brother? Because to say that Manny Pacquiao still has to fight after the millions that he's amassed, now, clearly not as much as Floyd Mayweather. He never earned as much as Floyd. But to say that he still has to fight after being a senator and possibly running for president next year, the Philippines, that Manny at age 42 still has to fight. What the hell is wrong with Floyd Mayweather Jr., guys? That's what I want to know. Guys, please comment if you're there. What is wrong with Floyd at this point? He's got Pac-Man envy. And why? Like, I can't understand that. Floyd retired undefeated. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer and an all-time great. Why does he continuously have to degrade, take cheap shots at Manny Pacquiao? Does this have anything to do with Manny Pacquiao at age 42 still competing at the elite level in the welterweight division? He's not doing it for the money, obviously. Don't you think Manny Pacquiao could also compete against someone like Conor McGregor or softer touch, have a rematch versus De La Hoya, whoop his rear end again? Don't you think he could do that for probably more money? Instead, he is fighting one of the best fighters in boxing and considered the man in the welterweight division. And Floyd is bad-mouthing this guy. He still needs the money. He still has to fight for money. No, he doesn't, brother. He's a senator of his beloved country. He's going to be running for president next year. So, no, he doesn't need the money, Floyd. Once again, guys, I understand why Mayweather was embarrassed. But you know what? This kind of behavior at a post-fight press conference, he will always be, whether he's retired or not, he will always be one of the premium ambassadors of the sport. Okay, have more respect for the process. Have more respect for the sport, brother. You know, the sport that made you a billionaire. Jeez. Look, man, I have no problem. If Mayweather wants to engage in another 8-round exhibition against Jake Paul next year or later this year, I don't care. Well within his right, and no one should have a problem with it. But when he starts to boast about ripping off the hardworking men and women who financially support our beloved boxing, that's where every fan should take exception and draw the line. Okay, guys, once again, could you ever imagine, like, say, on August 21st, if Manny Pacquiao gets knocked out by Errol Spence Jr., could you ever imagine Manny saying something like that post-fight? Well, at the end of the day, I don't care. I still made $40 million, and I'm still going to be a senator, so I really don't care about the out. Could you imagine him saying that? No. And guys, I'm sorry, Floyd, but that's why fans love Manny, and fans love to hate you. So, brother, on behalf of the global boxing community, please stay retired this time. You know, hey, man, curl up on your favorite sofa and watch Manny Pacquiao fight for greatness, fight for legacy when he attempts to become the oldest welterweight champion in the history of the sport at age 42. Right? Just have fun watching Manny, brother, and keep him out of your mouth. Okay? Because fight fans, they don't care about how much money you made. They don't care about how much money you made from the patches on your trunks. Fight fans want to be inspired, brother. Think about why you became a fight fan in the first place. Okay? Was it because you heard how much Larry Holmes was making per fight? No. Fans want to be inspired, guys. And I'm sorry, but hearing someone talk about legalized robbery is not inspiring. It's repulsive. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that, guys. It's absolutely repulsive. Excuse me. So, guys, now we're moving to our second topic du jour, right? And that's to Paulie Malignaggi. Boy, he was just in the news, and he did an interview with the Schmo, right? And he was asked, well, what are your thoughts on Fury versus Wilder 3? Well, Paulie is always very vocal, always very opinionated, and that's why he's one of the best commentators of the sport currently. He had this to say, quote, you know, I think Wilder's going to get absolutely eviscerated in this fight. I think he's going to get smoked to where he's never going to be the same again because he took such a bad beating the second time around. You know, the first time around, I thought Fury outpointed him. The second time around, he took a bad beating, and that'll usually change a lot of guys in general. And if you're going to ask for that type of beating again, I don't see where he's going. Here's the thing. Wilder doesn't know how to fight going backward. You're not going to figure out how to fight going backward. You're not going to mentally and psychologically and physically change yourself to the point where you're going to figure out how to fight this guy going backward. Fury will back you up and beat you up. End quote. And he has a very solid point. I don't agree with everything that he just said, but I do agree with, well, several things. I do agree that Wilder is going to get beaten. Look, and once again, when I first saw the training videos with he and current head trainer Malik Scott, I was very hopeful. I said, wow, I can't believe it. Wilder's actually looking to improve and understands that it was his shortcomings which led to his demise in the rematch, not Glovegate, not tampered water. And then all of a sudden, a week later, we hear interviews of him double downing on Glovegate, tampered water, all kinds of BS, right? And honestly, it's got to be very disheartening for his, band of fans. I don't know if they realize this or whatever, but this is very disheartening for anyone who is looking forward to a more competitive fight. Because that's not a good sign, guys. If you're still under the impression, and if you still believe, Deontay, that the only reason why you lost was because of Glovegate, because of an egg weight in the glove, because of tampered water. I'm sorry, what did he refer to it as? Juju? Gypsy Juju? Chingo. If that's why you believe you lost, then you're done for. You're done for. Paulie Malignaggi's absolutely right. Paulie went on to say this, right? When talks about Wilder's confidence and self-belief. He said this, quote, I think Wilder has the right approach. You kind of have to have this denial approach to it if you're going to take this fight. You can't think about it negatively. You've got to convince yourself that it was everybody else's fault and that Fury cheated. You've got to convince yourself all about all this stuff that people aren't going to take you seriously, but you've got to do it to put yourself in the best position mentally that you're going to win this fight. I said that, and I don't have a problem with that. If Wilder's going to be crazy enough to take this fight again, I think he has the right mental approach, end quote. I disagree completely. He would be much better off understanding that it was because of because of the holes in his fight game being the sole reason why he lost, being his deficiencies in the squared circle. That's the primary reason why he lost, for no other reason. Guys, Glovegate is ridiculous. It's absurd. Unless he realizes that it's because of his deficiencies in the ring, he will lose again. I agree with Paulie Malignaggi. Guys, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about Errol Spence latest comments, because we really haven't had a chance to touch on this, even though these comments took place last week on Barbershop Racist Conversations, right? So this is what Errol Spence had to say when asked about his future after, the fight with Manny Pacquiao beyond. He said this, quote, once I get that belt, like I told Al, I want that fight with Crawford. But if it don't happen, I'll probably just move up or something. I'm not going to waste my time trying to fight somebody who doesn't have any interest anymore, doesn't want to fight me anymore, end quote. Spence went on to say that he probably has 2 more fights left at 147 pounds and wants them to be Pacquiao and Crawford in that succession, if he does in fact get past Manny Pacquiao on August 21st. And then he said if the Crawford fight doesn't happen, then he'll likely move up to 145 pounds. He also gave praise to Manny Pacquiao during the interview. He said if anyone wants to complain that he's fighting Pacquiao instead of Crawford, or if anyone's complaining that Spence got Pacquiao and Crawford didn't, they should blame Bob Arum. And he said had this to say, quote, Pacquiao don't care who he fights. Pacquiao's a warrior. He's a guy who will fight anybody. If the money was right and everything was lined up correctly, Pacquiao would have fought Crawford. It didn't line up that way. I don't know what for whatever reason. I just say blame Bob, because he's the guy orchestrating it all, and it didn't happen in their favor. End quote. Guys, once, and like we've stated before on this show, where a lot of people have been very critical on Bob Arum, right? He is not, like, a lot of people says, well, he just doesn't have the money. That's BS, right? Here's why he did not feel confident in putting together a domestic fight between Crawford and Pacquiao. Once again, their deal with the $40 million site fee in Dubai, that fight coming together was completely contingent on that huge site fee. And why? Because Bob believes that even Spence versus Pacquiao will lose money. Keep in mind, the fact that Spence is fighting Pacquiao doesn't make this purse any cheaper than that of Pacquiao versus Crawford. Pacquiao is viewing this as potentially his last fight before he runs for president of the Philippines next year. He wants to make $40 million. Keep in mind, Errol Spence wants to get paid also. And if he's getting paid $7-8 million to fight a guy like Danny Garcia, how much do you think he's expecting to get paid on August 21st? I guarantee you he's getting paid no less than between $10 and $15 million. Bob Arum is like, no, thank you. I'll take a hard pass on that because I've already been involved with a very popular fight in 2020 that did fairly well on pay-per-view, but still failed to turn a profit. Even though Wilder versus Spence, or Wilder versus Fury 2, garnered 850,000 pay-per-view purchases, it still lost money because it was such a hefty purse for both men. Bob Arum sees this fight being exactly the same. He's like, no, thank you. I'm not in the business of losing money. I'd rather put together Crawford versus Benavidez 20 times before I put on something like that and lose my ass. Guys, he's not in the business of losing any money. And once again, it's not an indictment of how he feels about Crawford or Pacquiao. It's an indictment of the fight fans. Bob Arum is not confident that fight fans, diehard ones, are purchasing these events any longer. In fact, statistics show that fight fans are no longer purchasing these events. They're illegally streaming them. So that's the reason why Heyman got this fight. It's because Bob Arum did a hard pass. He has no confidence that fans will purchase this event. Excuse me. And as you'll be able to see when the numbers come in for Showtime's recent pay-per-view with Mayweather versus Logan Paul, you're going to see that fight put up great numbers because it appealed to a completely different demographic. One comprised primarily of mainstream and casual sports fans. A totally different demographic. Guys, mark my words. Even though there are going to be a lot of people watching the Pacquiao versus Spence, it will lose money for Al Heyman and everyone involved. It'll lose money for Fox. Keep in mind, this is a huge purse. Both men's purses combined will be anywhere between $55 and $60 million. And when you consider how much Fox is going to spend in promoting this event, you're talking about an overhead of between $60 and $65 million. That means in order to turn a profit, this will have to do well over 1 million purchases domestically. When is the last time a boxing pay-per-view has come close to that? Once again, you have to look towards Wilder and Fury, the rematch. And that only did 850,000. And that was a superb event in which it was a first-class promotion, co-promotion between ESPN and Fox. They spent almost $5 million promoting that event on 2 different networks. Spots in the Super Bowl, spots during college bowl games, the primetime press conference on Fox, the flagship channel. You're going to see a similar promotion for this, guys. And after everything is said and done, it will lose money. And why? Because diehard boxing fans will always justify why they're entitled to stream these events illegally. So, guys, say what you want about Bob Arum, but once again, he is not in the business of losing money. That's why you didn't see Pacquiao versus Crawford. He had the opportunity of staging this domestically, but he gave it a hard pass. So now Crawford, well, is still without a dance partner. So let's go to the style matchup, right? This is what Spence had to say in the same interview about the warrior, the legend, Manny Pacquiao. He said this, quote, "You know, I expect the same Manny Pacquiao we get every time. He always comes to fight, and I'm definitely going to come to fight. I'll be stronger and physically better than my most recent fight against Garcia. If he's looking at that, he should be looking at the Chris Algieri or Lamont Peterson fights. Instead, if he's looking at the last time I fought, thinking that he's found a weakness, he's going to be in serious trouble," end quote. Guys, he sure is going to be in trouble if he's looking at that. Hey, big shout out to my sister Denise Wards. How are you doing, Miss Denise? Hope life is treating you well. Thank you for joining us. And God bless you, sister. I hope all is well in Connecticut. Excuse me. Guys, he will be in trouble. Once again, Danny Garcia, Mikey Garcia, right? Those are counterpunchers by trade, right? Counterpunchers by trade, guys. So that means Errol Spence only has to fight one way. Stand in the center of the ring, control range with the jab and your footwork, and basically beat them with the right hand, freezing them with the sporadic and educated jab. That's not even scratching the surface on what Errol Spence can do. Guys, keep in mind, he's the most complete fighter, one of the most complete fighters in boxing. He has one of the best jabs in boxing. He has some of the best footwork in boxing. He is probably the most effective aggressor in boxing. So if Manny Pacquiao tries to take the lead and lunge in from mid to long range, he's going to get picked off with the jab and countered with the left hand. And if he tries to resort to plan B, in pivoting around him using the entire ring and trying to box, forcing Errol Spence out of the pocket, then he has to deal with Errol Spence's strength. Excuse me. Guys, this is where Errol Spence shines. He is most effective when he is the predator in the ring. He is among the very best in boxing at cutting off the ring, closing the distance, and fighting on the inside effectively. Guys, and at age 42, I'm sorry, even if he comes in looking like he did against Keith Thurman, I hate to say this, guys, but this style matchup is one of the worst that Manny Pacquiao could have possibly chosen for himself. Guys, look at the odds. Handicappers, boy, they know. You look at the handicappers in this, the sports books. To start initially, Spence is at a minus 450. 4.5 to 1 betting favorite. with Manny Pacquiao being a 3.5-to-1 betting underdog. And I know most people are looking at this line and saying, wow, a legend like Manny Pacquiao, a guy who is the, well, rightful super WBA welterweight champion, the only guy to defeat Keith Thurman, the only man to defeat Tim Bradley throughout his career, right? The legend, the chameleon. Guys, he's age 42. Even if he's not, this is a terrible style matchup for Manny Pacquiao. One that I don't think he can win. Ah, sister, thank you so much for joining us, Miss Denise. God bless you. What do you think? What do you think? Do you think the odds are justified in this scenario? Please share your thoughts. Because to be honest with you, like I said, I can't see Manny Pacquiao winning this fight. And I know this is going to be a very unpopular opinion to most Manny Pacquiao fans. But even in his prime, go back to a Manny Pacquiao in 2009 when he was knocking out Ricky Hatton, knocking out Miguel Cotto, obliterating Antonio Margarito. Guys, this is still not a good matchup for Manny Pacquiao. Errol Spence is in his prime right now. He's much bigger, much rangier, much stronger. He's a complete fighter. An educated jab with his footwork. That's the foundation of his defense. Good luck trying to hit him with lunging in from mid-range. It's not going to happen. So, guys, I'm sorry. I have to. Like, if I'm going to be a handicapper, right, and if I'm going to advise people on how to wager on this, I would be very safe in advising anyone to play a category bet on a clean Errol Spence knockout. Now, keep in mind, guys, Errol Spence Jr. is going to be fighting for attraction. If he knocks out Manny Pacquiao and everyone sees it, this is going to catapult him to another level of attraction, right? He wants to make an example of Manny Pacquiao. This is a legacy fight for him. There's a very good chance that when everything is all said and done for Errol Spence Jr., most people will remember him for this fight. He wants to put forth the best version of Errol Spence Jr., and he wants to make an example of Manny. He will push for a knockout. He won't just attempt to carry him like he did against Mikey Garcia. And guys, I hate to say this, but Errol Spence is going to become a much bigger level attraction than he is right now when he beats Manny Pacquiao. So what does that mean for a potential fight with Terrence Crawford? It means it's all but done. Look, if Terrence Crawford sticks to his guns and currently thinks he deserves a 50-50 because they're currently the number 1 and number 2 fighters in the division. If he sticks to his guns and says, nope, I'm not fighting you unless it's 50-50, hang it up. We're never seeing Spence versus Crawford then. We won't see it, guys. Unfortunately, it's done. Unless Terrence Crawford concedes and admits, you know what, Spence, after whooping Pacquiao, you deserve the lion's share of the purse. I just want this fight. Now, once again, anyone who's done an interview or spoken with Terrence Crawford or Bomac, you know that's not likely to happen. So I can say this, with Spence landing the Manny Pacquiao fight, it's a virtual impossibility that we will get to see Spence versus Crawford. Hang it up, guys. It's not going to happen. Because of all this talk about purse split, All right. It was all just talk up to this point. But after he beats Manny Pacquiao, it won't just be all talk. It'll be justified. He'll deserve it. And Terrence Crawford will not concede less than 50-50. Even 60-40 may not be justified at this point. Because think about this, guys. Crawford, outside of Omaha, Nebraska, isn't a big draw. His last fight at Madison Square Garden with Igas Calvillasquez only drew a little bit over 11,000 fans. And that was with Teofimo Lopez fighting Richard Comey in the co-main event. He's not a huge draw, guys. And Spence, after this fight, will be one of the biggest stars in boxing. So anyone who's hoping to see Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. after he beats Manny Pacquiao, hang it up. They're not going to see it. TC is just too prideful of a man, and he will never concede to giving away 65 or 75% of the purse, even if another fighter deserves it. Ain't going to happen. He was willing to do it with Pacquiao. I hope I'm wrong in this situation, guys, but from what I know about the business, and after several conversations with Terrence Crawford, highly unlikely, guys. He was willing to do that with Manny Pacquiao, give him the massive lion's share of the purse, which I think it was going to come out to 75% is what he was willing to give Manny Pacquiao with this $40 million site fee, right? But for some strange reason, he's not going to be willing to do that for Errol Spence. I think he just has more reverence for the sports-only 8-division world champion, and he has a lot more respect for the man. And justifiably so. He is the Pac-Man, future Hall of Famer, right? Guys, last thing I want to ask you is, going back to my comments about Floyd Mayweather and his criticism of Manny Pacquiao, claiming that he still has to fight for the money. He still has to fight. Floyd, beating himself on the chest, says, well, you know, I don't have to fight anymore. I just do it for fun. I do it because I want to. Manny Pacquiao's still fighting because he has to. End quote. You know, and once again, I want to get your thoughts on that, guys. What do you think? Does Manny Pacquiao still have to fight for the money, even though he's a senator of the Philippines, going to be running for president next year? Or do you think he just still believes that he has one great performance left in him? He still believes he is one of the elite of boxing. At age 42, after a 2-year period of inactivity, does Manny Pacquiao still believe he can upset the apple cart? Does he still believe he can be the man in the welterweight division and one of the sport's best pound-for-pound fighters? Guys, I choose to believe that Manny Pacquiao currently thinks that he can beat anyone at 147 pounds, because that's what all-time greats do. Look at how long Roy Jones hovered around the sport well past his prime. And why? When I interviewed Roy Jones in 2013 and asked him, Roy, you don't have anything left to prove. What are you doing, man? Why are you still fighting? You're a first ballot Hall of Famer, an all-time great, one of the best to have ever done it. He looked at me, smiled, and he said, why should I retire when I can still do it at a high level? And it was at a broadcast, guys. This is an interview I conducted with him during an HBO broadcast in Denver, Colorado. And it was Ruslan Provodnikov challenging Rene Alvarado for his WBO title, right? Or I'm sorry, Mike Alvarado, not Rene Alvarado. My apologies, guys. Ruslan Provodnikov versus Mike Alvarado in Denver. Right? And Roy looked at me and he smiled and he goes, "Why should I retire?" And he goes, "You see that man over there?" And he pointed to Jim Lampley. And he goes, "That man has been doing this for almost 30 years. And he's still at the top of his game. He's still the very best to have ever done it. So why aren't you asking for Jim to retire? I'm still doing this at just as high of a level. I'm still one of the best the sport's ever seen. Don't ask for me to retire unless you're willing to go up to Jim and say, hey, why are you still doing this? Why don't you retire? You've got nothing left to prove." So guys, men like Roy Jones, men like James Toney, men like Manny Pacquiao, they still genuinely believe they have one great championship elite level performance still in him. Guys, make no mistake about this. Manny Pacquiao is going into this fight against Errol Spence believing that he will defeat Errol Spence Jr. He still has, now keep in mind, even at age 42, Manny Pacquiao still has some of the best footwork in the division. And in years, at the tail end of his career, in the back half of his career, I should say, Manny Pacquiao has become a much more proficient and effective matador than he is an aggressor. Like, guys, I told everyone on the old Pugilist Corner, my old podcast back on East Side Boxing, told everyone when this fight first happened that Floyd Mayweather was going to defeat Manny Pacquiao. And why? Because offensively, Manny Pacquiao just comes in and he lunges in from mid-range. He uses a lot of feints, and he will come at you from odd angles, but he will dive in from mid-range. Against a fighter blessed with the best reflexes in boxing, Mayweather will pick him off all day long. He'll see it coming. Where Manny Pacquiao is more improved is when he's the matador, when he boxes. Guys, he still has some of the best footwork in the division. Able to jump in, crack you with a nice right hook, straight left hand, and then pivot around you. In my opinion, this is his best chance for victory. Manny Pacquiao still believes he is in his prime at age 42. He still believes he's capable of a 2009 prime Manny Pacquiao performance. And I tell you what, the fans, whether he wins or loses, the fans are the real beneficiaries of this. Guys, and going back to my first comment, my first topic, this is one of the reasons why fans love to love the Pac-Man. They love Manny Pacquiao. Where these same fans love to hate Floyd Mayweather, they love Manny Pacquiao. For this reason, he is a credit to the sport, and he's one of the best ambassadors boxing has ever seen. He'll never beat his chest and talk about how much money he just made at the expense of the fight fans. He'll never talk about a legalized bank robbery. Manny Pacquiao is and always will be a credit to the sport and one of the best ambassadors in the history of boxing. So, guys, look forward to that event on August 21st. It's going to be Manny Pacquiao versus Errol Spence Jr. on Fox pay-per-view. Also, guys, please be sure and let me know what your predictions are for Fury versus Delusional Wilder 3. Right? Delusional Wilder 3. Once again, this is a guy who truly believes that the only reason why Fury lost or Fury won in the second fight was because of white privilege. whatever the hell that means, and Glovegate, and tampered water. Ugh. So, guys, please leave comments as to what your predictions are for Wilder versus Fury 3, as well as Spence versus Pacquiao on August 22nd. But, guys, that's just going to about do it. I've been on the air for almost an hour. Want to thank you all for joining us. God bless you guys. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to WAWR Week Radio. And also, if you're feeling very charitable, please donate to our Cash App. Or a week on Cash App. God bless all of you guys. You have a wonderful day. And we will join you tomorrow with James Gogi, guys. I have a special treat for all of you. James Gogi is going to give his expert trainer's strategic breakdown for Manny Pacquiao versus Errol Spence Jr. I can't wait for that. That's going to be tomorrow evening at 9 p.m. Guys, please join us for that. Our special presentation of Coach Gogi's analysis, Spence versus Pacquiao. Until then, guys, thank you all for joining us. God bless all of you, and have a wonderful Monday evening.